Okay, so yesterday, or whatever day it was, we talked about angle relationships. We went over a whole bunch of vocabulary. Today we're going to be talking about parallel and perpendicular lines. Parallel lines are lines in a plane that never intersect. Okay? Perpendicular lines are lines that intersect to create 90-degree angles. And a transversal is a line that intersects two or more lines that lie in the same plane. So if you look at example 1, that is, or example 2, those are both examples of transversals. It's a set of parallel lines cut by a third line. All right? So, measure the angles formed by the transversal and parallel lines. Which angles seem to be congruent? Now, the measures of angles 1, 3, 5, and 7 all measure 150 degrees. Okay? Which means that angles 2, 4, 6, and 8 have to measure 30 degrees because all of those are adjacent angles to what we know and they lie on a straight line and they're vertical angles. So we talked about that yesterday. If we have vertical angles, the adjacent angles measure 180 when you add them up, and we've used 150, which means we have 30 degrees left. So, instead of rewriting which angles seem congruent, we're just going to say these all seem equal to each other. And then we need a little congruent sign. And these all seem congruent to each other because they measure the same, right? Which is very important. When you have 8 different angles in a transversal, you actually only have 2 answers because you use each answer 4 times. So, we're going to look at that in example 2. In the figure, line L is parallel to line M. Find the measure of each angle and justify your answer. Now, something easy to do. Because you have angles right next to each other that share a side, they're adjacent. And because those adjacent angles are formed by vertical angles, your opposite sides are equal to each other. And remember, we said that adjacent angles, when formed by vertical angles, equal 180 degrees. So what we have to do to find our second degree measure, besides 124, because we just said in the example above, you only have 2 answers. So you use those 2 answers 4 times. We subtract the given degree from 180. So we take 180 minus 124, and we get 56 degrees. Now, every single answer that we have on our paper, for example 2, will either be 56 degrees or 124 degrees because all of those angles are opposites. So, the measure of angle 4, right here, okay? This angle and this angle lie in the same position on that transversal. They both lie on the top and to the left, which means they are corresponding angles. We've talked about that in previous lessons, and if we haven't gotten there this year yet, we talked about it last year. Hopefully you did if you didn't go here. Okay, so because they're in corresponding positions, they have an equal measure. So the measure of angle 4 is 124. Okay, now the measure of angle 2. Well, would you agree that this is a straight line, this is a straight line, so they're intersecting lines to create vertical lines, and that this here is a straight line, straight angle, which measures 180. Those 2 angles are adjacent angles on a straight line. So, they're going to add up to 180, and we've already subtracted 124 from 80, so we know that angle 2 has to be 56 degrees. Okay? Because the measure of angle 2 plus 124 needs to equal 180 because they're on a straight line, We subtract 124 from both sides, and we get 56. That's what we just did. I just talked you through it. So all obtuse angles in the figure are congruent, which means they're equal, which means all acute angles are also congruent. Angle 2 is supplementary to the angle 124, meaning they add up to 180, which we already talked about earlier, but I'm just filling in the blanks for you. Okay, so in the line L is parallel to line M. Find the measure of each angle and justify your answer. So the measure of angle 6 is what we're looking for. Okay, now again, I have 124 degrees there. I can find what angle 1 is by doing 180 minus 124, and that equals 56 degrees. So now I know that my answer is either going to be 124 or 56. Now look at this. Before we get into looking for angle 6, these two are adjacent on a straight line, right? Angle 2 and the 124. So they have to add up to 180. So angle 2 has to equal 56 degrees. Okay? So the measure of angle 6 plus 124 has to equal 180. And that is because angle 4 and 124 are corresponding angles, which means they measure the same. So when you're looking at angle 6 and angle 4 together, those have to equal 180. And we know angle 4 equals 124 because of this and the fact that they're corresponding angles, and corresponding angles are equal. So we subtract 124 from both sides, so the measure of angle 6 is 56. Or we could also know that angle 2 and angle 6 are both below the parallel lines and to the left of the transversal, so they are also in corresponding spots, so they would be equal. And you can kind of just know because you can look at it and you know one's a supplementary or obtuse angle and one is an acute angle, and you know by looking what ones are acute angles and which ones are supplementary.